It's a sad day when the Financial Times opens its Monday edition, as it did this week, with the first sentence of its lead article declaring, quote, "The U.S. is the brightest spot in the world economy," end of quote. And then goes on to qualify that comment by pointing out that we shine only within a global economy, as they described it, that is on the ropes. This was followed by a Wall Street Journal report from Tokyo yesterday under the banner headline, "Global Recession Risk Rises." That article said, and I quote, "The IMF upgraded growth prospects for only one major nation. Compared with its July forecast, it projected that the United States would grow at 2.2%, which is 0.1%, that is 0.001 higher than previously estimated." One is tempted to conclude, as I've remarked on many occasions, that we are but the best-looking horse in the glue factory of hapless economies. Now, I have a preferred equine analogy for the American economy, and it looks like this. It's of the Triple Crown winner, Secretariat, a chestnut thoroughbred with a very strong, muscular physique, leading the pack by a record-breaking 31 lengths at Belmont Stakes for a victory that would shock the world. I'm convinced that with proper care and feeding, American businesses can pace the United States economy to win the equivalent of the Triple Crown of the global economy. And I believe we have laboratories within our own borders, such as Texas, that provide us with examples of how Congress might help business do so and help our nation avoid the European trap. If we can liberate the private sector from the shackles of uncertainty about fiscal policy and overregulation and take the best from states that have succeeded in attracting job-creating businesses, I'm convinced that, like Secretariat at Belmont, the United States can win the longest race by an astonishing margin. And in doing so, we can show the way for others. So questions, how might this be done? What's holding us back? I think it helps to retrace a little bit of history. On this 50th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's important to remember that we won. We won the Cold War. We spent a generation of blood and treasure to move from the constant threat of mutually assured destruction to mutually assured competition. As we did in the aftermath of many of our nation's great struggles, World War I, World War II, we emerged from a titanic struggle with the Soviet Union as a victor and as the world's leader. And we liberated not only Eastern Europe when the Berlin Wall came down, but also incentivized the forces of economic reform in China and Vietnam and India and elsewhere. Here's the point. We got exactly what we fought for: a world economy expanded by billions of new consumers and producers of goods and services rather than weapons of war. What followed the fall of the Soviet threat was an opening up of the world economy, aided by trade liberalization championed by two presidents, a Republican named George H.W. Bush and a Democrat, Bill Clinton, who together shaped and delivered the Uruguay Round, NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, and myriad other arrangements to allow for the freer flow of goods, of communications, and capital. This is worth remembering. Under both Republican and Democratic leadership, we actually did what was economically sensible. The result was a long-lived expansion, but it ended, as you know, in tears. Success led to complacency. Complacency led to tolerance and even the encouragement of excess. We spent more than we could afford, and our government, Republicans and Democrats alike, continued at an accelerated pace down the path of promising more in social programs and other spending programs than we could sustain. And on the regulatory front, we turned a collective blind eye to economic malpractice, resulting in the spectacular failure of Enron and culminating with the collapse of the megabanks, for which even a cursory glance at their balance sheets would have revealed, in the words of one of my colleagues, that nothing on the right was right and nothing on the left was left. What started out as a widely heralded period of so-called great moderation and seemingly endless growth metastasized into a cancer of excess and speculation, resulting in a crash from which we are now only slowly and very, very slowly recovering. The wreckage that I've just described and its aftermath have been widely discussed and have been analyzed in countless fora and publications. This afternoon, I want to just quickly highlight some of the key outcomes that I believe are often overlooked. First among them is that American businesses have emerged from the crisis revamped and hyper-efficient. When producers of goods and services cannot price what goes out the door as richly as the cost of what comes in the door, as was beginning to happen in the summer of 2008, or when demand for one's product collapses, as happened post-Lehman, where firms can't grow their top line, they batten down their hatches. They look to preserve their margins by cutting costs and ramping up productivity. Over the past 4+ years, U.S. businesses have cut operating costs to the bone. They've taken advantage of cheap and abundant capital made possible by the Federal Reserve to rejigger their balance sheets, exploiting the lower cost of debt and the Fed-driven bull market for stocks. American businesses, large and small, public and private, have done this with an alacrity that has dismantled the momentary notion, the momentary conceit that the European business model was superior, or that the Chinese adaptation of economic management was somehow better suited for a globalized economy. The private sector in the United States has adjusted to the new world faster than you can say Japan is number one. American business is now more fit than ever before. Second, despite a lot of fire breathing and beating of the breast, our government has, for the most part, preserved the open trade environment fashioned under our 41st and 42nd presidents. Protectionism has been held at bay. Our businesses have the entire world now to source from and sell into. They also have the option to invest in job-creating ventures in more places than ever, an option that necessitates that our government reboot tax policy if it wishes for American businesses to invest in job creation at home. Third, we now have more than enough fuel in reserve to finance a prolonged period of job creation and economic expansion. The Fed has $1.4 trillion in excess private bank reserves on deposit, the 12 Federal Reserve banks, such as mine. There are additional cash resources lying fallow in non-depository financial enterprises, and there's an additional $2 trillion or so of cash or cash equivalent assets sitting on the sidelines in the coffers of businesses above and beyond their operating needs and present plans for capital expenditure or CapEx. The cost of money is nil. Interest rates for creditworthy businesses are the lowest in the history of the Republic. Hawks like me worry that our central bank has done far more than was required. And people like me are concerned about the difficulties we will encounter when we need to tighten monetary policy and exit from what I call uber easy monetary policy. But this much I do know. Presently, American businesses, big and small, public and private, have money burning a hole in their pockets. They have the financial wherewithal to expand and to hire.